Welcome to the Plastic Recycling Podcast. I'm joined by Steve Alexander, President and CEO of the Association of Plastic Recyclers, APR, to help us navigate the Biden administration's plastic pollution report and an overview of the APR Design Recognition Program. Steve will share his deep insights on how these developments are set to impact everything from manufacturing to procurement and why they matter to all of us. To kick things off, could you walk us through the key highlights of the Biden administration's plastic pollution report?
Well, to be honest with you, for us, there's one highlight. And that highlight is for the first time, there's been a potential federal policy that talks about mandated recycled content. That's something that APR has been pushing for since 2006. The fact of the matter is that there are several things that have to happen in order for your package to be truly recyclable. Your package needs to be designed to be a recyclable one, because if that doesn't happen, it doesn't matter what else happens. It needs to be able to be collected and then sorted properly in the marketplace. It needs to be able to be processed. And then at the end of the day, it needs to be reutilized in the marketplace. And everything up to the market end, the demand side, is a cost to the system. It costs to design a product. It costs to collect it. It costs to ship it. It costs to process it. But if you don't have a demand market, then you'd have no monetization of the system. To question why people are even in this business if they don't have a stable long-term market. And we don't in this industry because there's not a demand cycle and there's a competition for this material because the price of virgin material continues to be depressed at records we've never seen before. So, our point is that no matter what else is in that program that the Biden administration has put forward, the key to recycled plastic and the key to engaging the sustainability of plastic packaging is to ensure that there is a demand market, a monetization of the system. Because without that, anything else that you do doesn't matter. So those are the types of things that are critically important. And that's how we feel about the proposal, because there'll be a lot of debates about a lot of the components of the program. We just heard, by the way, that the United States apparently, I think it'll be confirmed this afternoon, has agreed to sign on at the Global Plastics Treaty with other countries about limiting production of plastic material, putting a cap on production of plastic material. I mean, that's very huge, obviously, but in order to satisfy the marketplace needs, you're going to need more recycled material. And so you're going to need a market for that material. So that's the big thing for us is that you need to have a demand market for your product. Your company is at the core of who we are as an organization. We represent the recyclers. This is what we do every single day. We think we know what needs to happen in order to improve the recyclability and quote the circularity of materials and packages in the marketplace. And our goal is to enact policies that help companies like yours be more successful.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that overview. Steve, talk to us a little bit more about the minimum recycled content that you're seeing in the report. And in addition to that, there's some key goals that the government has set out for federal procurement for 2027, 2035. Could you shed some light on that? Because obviously that will spur up some demand.
Well, I think one of the fallacies of any proposal like that is the thought process that as an industry, we can just snap our fingers and we can produce enough recycled material in order to meet these goals, which seem to be arbitrarily developed. Who chose a 35% content rate by X date? Why? What was it based on? We have experience when we look at data, and let's just take a state that's fairly similar to Canada in terms of population, California. They have a 25% recycle rate for PET and PET beverage containers that they set a couple of years ago for 2025. Then they go to 2030. Then they go to 2035. They go 35%, 50%, 75%. What are those numbers based on? What we were able to do is, and it's interesting, three groups did completely independent of each other percent is the recycling rate that we could hit in terms of content unless the state worked to collect more material. If you think about it for a second, okay, what can industry control? What can we control in this arena? We can control the design of the package. We have developed sortation technology so the material sorts properly. We can process the material. We need help with markets, but we can push for markets. What we don't control as an industry is the supply of the material. That's a government function. And yet, snapping your fingers and saying, meet this number by this date, or else, quote, recycling fail. I think there's a responsibility on the side of the supply side, which is the government side, to enable more collection of material. More than 50% of the population doesn't have access to a convenient recycling program. So where are we going to get that material? We have the capacity today, and you probably do the same in your company. We have the capacity to more than double the recycling rate for PET, high density, and polypropylene today. We have the capacity today to do that. We don't need government funding. We don't need anything else. You know what we need? We need more supply. How do we get that supply? How do you encourage consumers to participate? How do you set up programs? Is that industry's responsibility to set up a take-back program? We've seen that doesn't work. It has to be a government infrastructure. Those are the types of things when you talk about how are these goals going to work. Numbers sound great, but unless there's a more structured infrastructure, a more collection, a streamlined, consistent collection infrastructure across the marketplace, you're not going to meet those numbers. And I'll tell you, let's look, for instance, again, Canada is much more standardized than we are here south of the border. We have 15,000 recycling programs across the United States. 9,000 of them take different things. So in my town, we collect PET, high density, and that's it. Town next to me collects PET, high density, polypropylene, polystyrene, and film and flexible material. The town beyond that doesn't collect anything at all. So, I mean, we do a phenomenal job of confusing the consumer. Gee, is this recyclable or not? I don't know what it's like in your household. I mean, you would think that I'd know all this. My family's asking me all the time, hey, is this recyclable? More times than I want to admit, I'm like, I don't know. Let me look at the list. What are they taking? So, the concept that a regulatory body can dictate seemingly out of thin air without hard data, some sort of level that would determine whether or not recycling is successful is fallacy. So it's really it's when I hate this term, but the whole system has to work together. And right now, the supply side is not working and the demand side is spotty at best. So, pretty much the concept that has worked for centuries is that if your customer wants something, you're going to figure out how to supply it. Or if they need something, you're going to figure out how to supply it. Right? I mean, you guys aren't in the business for generating material and letting it sit on your dock at the end of the month. Right? I mean, let's be honest. And without a demand market, that's exactly where we end up.
Steve, if this new bill or mandate solves the demand issue, you highlighted the supply issue. How do we solve and reach those targets? Or are these targets going to continue to move out as we've seen a number of businesses, a number of brands set their own internal targets, and then it just kind of continues to shift because of the challenges of demand, because of the challenges of supply? How do you see that playing out?
So, particularly in this country, in the United States, you have this separation of we call it federalism. The feds do one thing, but states are responsible for something else. And historically, state and localities have been given the responsibility, provided the opportunity to be responsible for waste management and waste management programs. So what you're seeing now is you're starting to see states, California, Oregon, Washington, Minnesota, New York, start to create a statewide recycling list. So if you're going to have a recycling program in your community, at a minimum, you must have these materials on there. So that begins to provide some market certainty. So you'll know that you'll at least be getting those materials. But more importantly, there needs to be a pathway for, say, materials that don't initially make the list to create an opportunity for them to ultimately get on the list. And I'm thinking like polystyrene in this arena, right? Or polypropylene in this arena. So I think that, again, you're trying to just create a strategic plan that provides as much certainty in the marketplace as you can possibly provide. So that if I'm looking to expand my operation to produce more material, I need to know, where am I going to get that material and where am I going to sell it? Because right now, you and I operate on a spot market basis. I mean, we never really know how much material we're getting in to produce on a monthly basis. And at the end of the month, we're not really sure how much we're selling at the end of the month. Why are we doing this? So I think that there are a couple of really big solutions that you can implement. I'm not a big government guy, but the fact of the matter is, unless we make some changes, some policy changes, we're basically implementing the definition of insanity. We're doing the same thing over again, expecting a different result. So policy has to be a driver, in my opinion. But there are some non-policy drivers as well. If you're able to develop a long-term contract with a customer, so you know that you're going to have a market, a certain material over a 2 or 3 year period, you're able to negotiate a better price for yourself and for that customer. But in order to do that, you have to do the same thing. You have to have a long-term contract to generate your supply stream. You're providing market certainty. And also provides price certainty and quality certainty across the board. So long-term contracts are something that we can simply implement or require in the marketplace. That's sort of I would say a non-policy procedure, but we need to jumpstart. So we need programs to collect more material and ensure that we can sell that. Because if we know that we can sell the material, you know you've got a market and you know it's going to be at this price at least. Well, then with that certainty, you can then pay your supplier and say to your supplier, hey, I'll pay you a little more if you give me a better quality bale. So I don't have to, pay you and then only get a 60% yield on the bale that I'm buying from you. I want a bale that I can get 90% yield. I'm willing to pay you a little more because you know what? I have to do less. I can be more efficient and I can sell that bale down here. I already got a market. So those are the types of things that we can do. And that's where the consistency comes in across the board. And that's what's so imperative about what it is we're trying to do. Look, folks, this isn't rocket science. It's basic blocking and tackling. Okay. You need supply and you need a demand. I don't know. That's economics 101. Even I got to name that. So, sometimes we make this too hard. Sometimes, you get involved with the regulatory process, you get involved with regulators, people who don't understand how the process works. We get a lot of push to have beverage caps have recycled content in them. So if you've ever been in a facility and you see what the cap material comes out at, and you want to produce a red cap or a green cap, that is a physical impossibility. Right? Unless you're doing black, even if you do that, because you can always mush or put it up together, you're going to separate those out, are you? So those are the types of things, what works. Your company knows what works. We're not arguing against wanting to be successful. We want recycling to be successful. Our business model depends on it. We want it to grow. We want more material in. We want more people to buy our material. We all win. And oh, by the way, recycling plastic gives you the greatest greenhouse gas reductions on a consumer basis and lowers your carbon footprint and uses less energy than anything else a person can do to impact their own personal carbon footprint. Recycling that plastic container and putting it in the bin reduces their own personal carbon footprint better than anything else they can do, essentially. So, of course, we want to do this. But, unless we meet these artificial mandates, 35% by X or 50% by X, recycling doesn't work. I mean, there are things that we can do to make this work, but I think that policy is a component of what we're trying to achieve, but it has to be mixed with market-based solutions. I know that's a bad word to keep up, but what I'm talking about is long-term contracts. I'm talking about clean material. I'm talking about designing your product, having a design platform so your product is actually recyclable. Because let's face it, if you're designing a product and it contaminates the recycling stream, it doesn't matter if it's collected or sorted or there's a market for it. And when brand companies seemingly have yet to understand that they are the supplier of their own recycled content, because you can't ask us to create recycled content when you're poisoning the very stream of material upon which you want us to make content from. This is where the term circular really, if you visualize it, in graduate school, we had a term called garbage in, garbage out, right? You're putting something in the system up here and it goes through the system and it can come out as recycling. Well, if what you're putting up there is contaminating the system, you know, we don't magically have a filtering dust and say, puff, we can make it content, right? So that's where design comes in across the board.
Let's talk more about design because this is a big goal for APR, which is improving design standards. And you've come up with the APR Design for Recyclability Recognition Program. Tell us a little bit more about this. Why was it created?
Well, the program is actually almost 30 years old. We update it consistently. It's a dynamic design guide. They can go on our website. It's interactive. The design guide, essentially, particularly in this country, the analogy I use is there's no speed limit on the autobahn, and that there's no government standard to determine whether or not a package is technically recyclable or not. And what this program does, there are testing protocols. They're the only testing protocols that exist in North America and across most of the globe that allow a packaging designer or a packaging engineer or an innovator to take any innovation or new package and run it through a series of tests to determine, is it recyclable given our current infrastructure? B, is it recyclable with what we would call a detrimental feature? Or C, is it not recyclable? So there are many things that can make a product not recyclable. It could have a bad label. It could have too much adhesive. It could have the inks that contaminate the flake. They could have barrier layers that interfere with the recyclability of the product. It could be a colored material that there is not sorted in a way that the market will support. So we have the preferred, the results are then reviewed when you go through the testing, and they're either preferred program or they're with detrimental feature, which we'll still accept. And what's an example? I would say a paper label is an example. As you know, probably from your processes, your paper, it comes up your screens, you got to shut down, whatever. We prefer not to have that, but we deal with it. But we can deal with it. And frankly, if we said no paper labels, you'd lose a ton of supply. It's, again, on the website, it's fairly straightforward. We have examples of what features are and non-features are, et cetera. But the concept is that, as we talked about it earlier, if you're not designing the product to be recyclable, then you're contaminating the entire stream. It doesn't take much of a contaminating material and a bale of material. So, and the lack of understanding that's out there sometimes is stunning. We have a design guide training program that we conduct. We develop a customized training program where, we'll go into a brand company or a converter or a packaging company, and we will customize a training program based on their product stream and the 12-day program. And we will walk through their packaging mix, and we will, walk them through and identify where our potential contaminants and some changes they can make. But more importantly, you introduce folks to the way the material flows through the system. Be amazed, maybe not. I was amazed when we first started doing this. The number of packaging engineers who have never contemplated, never mind physically going to a MRF, gone to see how the material flows through the system, understands the impact on their design feature on the potential recyclability of the product. That's not front and center. That's not top of mind, as the marketing people say, for a packaging engineer, right? You're talking about, you're trying to put together some gee whiz new package. Okay. You want to see it in the market. The goal is to get this in front of as many people, because what you don't want is you all of a sudden noticing like full wrap shrink labels contaminating the stream. And you call us and say, hey, APR, we're seeing great proliferation of, of PET containers with full wrap shrinks on it. We're having trouble sorting. Okay. What you want to do, not do it at the end of the chain. You want to introduce it to the design standard and say, this is what's going to happen. We want to put it on their home screen so they're thinking as they develop it, you know, how is this going to impact the recyclability? And the design guide is now interactive. So you can go on the website and you can start putting the components in. It was made for engineers, much more user-friendly platform. So even guys like me can look through it and figure it all out. But the concept is you can go in and you can make a couple of yes, no inputs, and it can tell you whether or not you need further testing. It can tell you whether or not it is recyclable, or gives you some potential changes. We've developed a sortation protocol, which is actually multi-material. It's the first time it's ever been done for one of the four components. So the sortation protocol allows a brand company or one of your customers to take a package or an innovation, and rather going through, say, 20 MERS and try and get some average, they can run it through using this protocol, and it tests for size. Let's see, size, shape, and also whether or not there's too much metal component in it. So you have those three. And then more importantly, this is the first time it's ever been done for 2D, 3D. So if you think about it, like your company, if you got a high density polyethylene milk jug and it's crushed, where does it sort? So it can tell the brand owner it's going to sort with the corrugated 90% of the time, or it's going to sort with the paper 80% of the time, or it's going to sort with the high density 60% of the time. So the brand owner would know that, and they could adjust the package accordingly. And that's a huge component, the sortability as well. But even if it sorts right, if it's not designed right, you don't really care what it says. So design is where it all starts. And that's why it's just a critical component. We've pretty much have global reach. We're almost 99% aligned with Recyclability out of Europe. It's been translated into Spanish and French and Mandarin, and it's going to be translated into, we just reached a contract to translate it into French. Not sure that'll be of interest to you, but so we're just trying to develop, guidelines so that people are aware of it. There's probably been, I don't know, it's on our website, probably been before 100 major consumer brand companies that have done this, some of them 4 times. And then we also do these regional 80,000 foot, like introductory presentations, like over a couple of day period, where they literally will take people to a MRF and they'll see where the material comes from. and then we'll run them through like a test MRF and show how the material flows and do some iterations, at this speed or at this angle or this size screen. We'll seed some material in curbside or drop off, and then we'll walk them through the overall guide program. Actually, we've got one coming up in October down in Dallas, October 8th through 10th, I think. We got about 300 people at those. That's an introductory process. We've got some video online that people can look at, but it's just a critical thing that, uh, if you think about it, if you don't have speed limits on the highway, people do whatever they want. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, because really, I mean, if you really think about it, up until now, the packaging industry, other than food contact, has been primarily unregulated in terms of they can make the material from, what kind of label they can put on it, what they can say on it, right? I mean, so it's been sort of the Wild West out there. And, you know, regulators and policy people are now forcing you in a way that maybe not be the most productive, but forcing you to address those issues. So we're just trying to provide a tool to help people meet those standards.
That's pretty incredible. The results that you've achieved with all those brands and with the movement. Are you seeing recycling rates shift towards based on the shift on design? Or is it just more? Yeah, I mean, I know that that's one component of the recycle rates. And obviously, as you touched base before, each MRF is going to take different types of materials. How have you seen, or is it too early to tell?
So I look at it the opposite way, and I know people might not like this, but the way I look at it is, what would your contamination rates be if the APR design guide wasn't in existence? You'd have full wrap shrink labels out there where NIR sortation couldn't read the resin. You'd have inks that would be bleeding into your wash waters and latching onto flake. You'd have companies putting in 40% calcium carbonate, causing your stuff to sink, high density to sink with your PET, right? Uh, so I know that's a backwards way of looking at it. Recycling rates, if anything, they've gone down because the denominator, as you are aware, has skyrocketed over the past 6 to 10 years. The quality of the bales, even with that extension of the denominator, hasn't been negatively impacted as much as you would think. I'm looking at it from an alternative view because the contamination in bales without the APR design guide or design guides in general could be at incredibly high levels. I mean, I would argue without design guides, as a company, you wouldn't be able to make any money on recycling because it would cost you so much to get the contamination out. You wouldn't be able to sell your product, particularly with the Delta already with virgin material. So would there even be a plastics recycling industry without some sort of design standard going forward? But we've seen the volume of materials explode. Not only that, you think about the volume of new packaging that is not recyclable, that has replaced historically recyclable packaging. And so we're not seeing contamination rates skyrocket to the extent you might. I mean, you think you got a multi-layer, multi-laminate pouch with tuna fish on it, replacing Charlie in a can, which was a eminently recyclable package. Well, why are we doing that? Why are we creating packaging that is completely non-recyclable? Which leads me to one of the real issues we face as a recycling industry. Everything we're doing is to solve a problem somebody else has created. At some point, the people who not just design packages, but the consumer brand has to bear responsibility for the packaging wastes that they create because you've got entire industries that are built upon solving the issue. And it's like we take 4 steps forward and then we have to hit 8 steps back. I mean, NIR sortation came out. Great. We got speed, speed, speed. Well, guess what? Now we can't see black, right? So we go backwards. So now we got to create markers for black, right? So, you put full wrap shrinks on it. Well, now we can't see the container, the resin that's underneath it. So we create a delabel and everybody uses a delabel. But now we will lose 25% of the bottle resin when we do that. All these improvements in plastics cost the recycler money. And optical is about $1 million. But all said and done, you throw all that in to get it running and all hooked up. Some recyclers or MRFs, they got 14 opticals. The other issue is, if you think about it, recyclers are just like a MRF, one step down pike. We get material in, we have to sort it, okay? Because generally speaking, I don't know what you get in your PET bales, but you're getting about 60 to 70% yield. I mean, there's some side streams there, but you're still getting some yield out, some contamination in there. Most MRFs weren't built to handle the volume they have to handle, and they're not in business to stockpile material. I mean, they want that material through. So what happens? It goes through faster and of greater volume than what it was made for, ends up in a bale. Who deals with that? You and our other members, right? You guys deal with that. So, but there's a lot there. I know I'm throwing a lot out there. I'm not making excuses, but at some point, you have to stand up and say, we've got the whole industry out there that is drowning, trying to solve a problem that another part is creating, and how they can work with us is to at least buy the end product that we're producing, which will help us all down the line. So enough of that.
I think all valid points. Steve, tell me one thing. If we zoom out and we take into consideration everything that you've talked about, supply and demand shifting, what does the next, you know, 5 years look like for plastics recycling on the demand side, on the supply side, given all of the changes that we're seeing?
I think the global plastics treaty discussions in some ways have woken up at least the federal government in the United States to the issue. I think people are realizing we're not going to ban our way out of this issue. And I think we've yet to realize the consequences of certain product bans. So I think like maybe in the next year or two, you'll see a lot more discussion about product bans, but I think over the next 4 or 5 years, you're going to see that pull back a little bit, because then you start getting into the substitution packaging and the impacts that those have. And the more consumers begin to understand the environmental impact of substitute packaging, I think there needs to be there needs to be greater understanding in terms of energy, greenhouse gas emissions, alternative packaging. I don't want to get into a material war, but we may have to get into a material war. Just if we're really talking about global implications, global footprint, carbon emissions, things like that. I think that in the short term, you're going to see incredible pressure on bags filled with flexible material and styrenics, polystyrene, what have you. You're going to see more and more of these state lists just focus on PET, high density, and hopefully polypropylene. And then there'll be a struggle to get like polystyrene back on. It's just going to be, because both of those materials simply need a collection infrastructure. If we can collect those materials, we can process them. But I think in the next 18 months, you're going to continue to see this ban and the ban activity. But then I think there'll be some more rational approach. Now, this could be Pollyannish, but the reality is when people recognize, say, that the alternative to a high density polyethylene shampoo bottle is a glass bottle in the shower, they might start thinking twice. Just a personal anecdote. The state that I live in has banned plastic bags. Okay. People detest the paper grocery bags. The workers don't like it. And there's a supermarket in my town that's 9 miles away from the state line. They have lost a considerable amount of business to the supermarket 9 miles down the road because that state allows plastic bags. And that's the number one reason people shop. So it's going to take a while, but it's not as easy as banning plastic straws. There are implications for this somewhere down the ride. So I think you'll see some material. Continue to see some material bans, but I think you'll start seeing some backing off on these wholesale bans of quote, single-use plastics. There's I don't know if you guys know Merlin Plastics and Tony McCutcheon. Tony was one of the founders of APR, and he's been on our board more times than I can remember. And Tony, God love him, he puts it, it's not single use if it's recyclable. And, I think we got to pound that a little bit more. I was just reading this morning and in the news clips, Boston, Massachusetts has this big issue. Time to get rid of single use plastic, and you just want to say it's not single use if it's collected. It's not, there are markets for this material. So, and certainly we want quick solutions and easy solutions. What I don't want to have happen, let me just say this. What really, 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 really worries is legislators have ADD. They focus on a problem. They take a swipe at solving part of a problem that sounds good. Then they move on to the next thing, and they haven't really solved the problem, but you're never going to get them back to working on that particular issue because they took care of it already. So when we look at, and we're seeing it right now in California with Senate Bill 54, it's so convoluted. The regulators are going, "Oh my God, can you guys help us? How do we do this?" But asking the legislature to go back and fix it is not going to happen because they're done. They've dealt with that. So what we want to make sure from a regulatory standpoint is that while we have this opportunity, which we haven't had really in a long time, we have to get it as right as we possibly can because we're not going to get another crack at it. And that's why what we really have to do as recyclers is step up our game and be much more forceful. Unfortunately, as a plastic recycler, you're looked at as a plastic company, right? And we are looked at as the plastics industry. And, at the end of the day, they really don't because we're talking about replacing their substrates, right? So, they want to work with them. They're really nice people, but we're lumped in with them. So people don't necessarily, the first reaction is, "Oh, you're just the plastics industry." When I was in Ottawa for the global plastics treaty discussion, I had an individual from a global environmental organization who I've worked with on and off a couple of years. And I just said, look, we got to work closely together. What we can do shows, "Well, yeah, you got to bring your guys to the table." I said, "Well, my guys are here." She goes, "No, no, no. The chemical guys and the plastics industry." I said, "You know who we are? We're the recycler. That's who we are. We're the recycler." "Oh, well, you're plastics." I said, "No, we're not plastic. We're the recycler." But, that's just I think that's the reality. I don't know. I struggle. What else can we call ourselves to have, to overcome that credibility, right? But anyway, those are some of the things that I see. But this is not for the faint-hearted. This issue is not for the faint-hearted. Recycling plastic is the technological equivalent of trying to put somebody on the moon. And, it's hard and it's complicated and it's science based. And, we haven't taught science really well in this country. I don't know about Canada for a long time, right? People are very successful without having to take a science course. And so it sort of glazes over and we're susceptible to sound bites. And how many people know there's different types of plastics? You don't. So we've got our challenges, but you know, progress, not perfection. I do believe we're making progress. I'll just say that. So
I understand it. It's not an easy problem at all to solve. Steve, this has been very, very insightful from your thoughts about the new mandate from Biden administration to the possible joining of the US to the Plastic Pollution Treaty, outlining the design program, what demand and supply looks like, and what it means in depth. It's been really, really valuable, Steve. If anybody wants to check out more details about the APR, you probably have one of the best domain names, definitely the best domain name in our industry, which is plasticsrecycling.org. Which is very, very difficult to miss. Steve, is there anything else or anywhere else that our audience can find you, find APR, and access some of the resources that you spoke of?
Everything's on the website. Like you said, plasticsrecycling.org. More than happy to invite anybody to attend one of our meetings free of charge. We hold 3 meetings a year, one in conjunction with the Plastics Recycling Conference. If any of your people want to come on down, just have them get in touch with me. We'll make sure they got a nice reduced rate for the conference in DC next year. But I'm not here to push that. The more people that use the resources that are there, the better we all are. The other thing is we're one market. Material flows back and forth across the borders all the time. We have about 27 members that are in Canada. Our board members are from Canada. We're international. We have more folks internationally than ever before. But the information is available, and if it's not there, call us. I mean, our technical group are mostly polymer scientists, mostly doctorates. We've been fortunate enough that we've been able to grow our employment base. Our membership continues to grow, so that we've been able to bring on in 2020, 2024, we brought on 3 new folks with PhDs from a technical perspective. We brought 2 more in last year. I think we're up to 5, 6 or 7 PhDs on a staff of 20. So, we're pretty immersed in the technical side of things. So happy to help people with any challenges they have, and then go from there, supplier and a technical advisor. I'm not a membership driven guy. We've never hired a membership director at APR in my 20 years. People essentially find us and come to us. So I'm not a real good marketer, but would love to have folks come on down. I mean, and your company is an example of a success story. And I would encourage them to go to your website, because that's exactly what we're talking about. You serve multiple substrates and you're a market for the material. They can see everything we're talking about just by going to your company. So more than happy to work with you guys and do whatever we can to try and solve this issue, because the issue isn't going away, and they're going to need companies like yourself to solve this problem. So we'll just go from there. So where are you based?
Toronto.
You're in Toronto. We've held meetings in Canada and in Toronto. We've held 2 meetings in Toronto in the past few years. I think we're booked through 2025. I think we're looking at June of 2026, maybe going back to Toronto or Montreal. We're available to be a technical resource for anybody. So just, that they can contact you or they can contact me, and happy to do it. We're to help you all continue to do what you do. The fact that you guys have a podcast like this is awesome. Congratulations to you for doing this.
Thank you. And thank you for coming on. It's been awesome. It's been really, really good having you on, Steve. And thank you for listening, and until next time.